Nonetheless, it was not until the days of Valacar that the first great evil came upon Gondor, the civil war of the Kin-strife, in which great loss and ruin was caused and never fully repaired. Greetings and well met, my friends. Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be taking a look at the story of the Gondorian Civil War, named the Kin-strife, not to be mistaken with the kinslayings of the First Age. As we do with all of our wars of the Legendarium videos, we will first take a look at both sides of the war, the armies of each side, and the commanders, before looking at the story of it all. I will go ahead and link some related articles and videos, of course, in the description and cards. Everyone, as always, thank you all for joining me today. Let us begin our tale about the Kin-strife. First, beginning with the forces of each side, as this was a civil war in one kingdom, there were Gondorians on both sides. On one side, there were Gondorians that were loyal to the true heir of the throne of Gondor, and their allies among the Northmen of Rhovanion also. I imagine the Gondorians on this side numbered in the tens or hundreds of thousands, while I would believe that the Northmen of Rhovanion were of a larger size, being of the middlemen who had dwelt in Middle-earth for a longer time than Gondor itself had been established, and they had a large kingdom in the north. While the blood of Numenor made some Gondorians believe themselves to be greater than the Northmen, many in Gondor remembered the ancient kinship they shared, as the Northmen of Rhovanion had lineage spanning back to the ancestors of men and the Edain of the First Age. The commander of this force was Eldacar, the true heir to the throne of Gondor. Standing in opposition to this force were Gondorians who believed the blood of Numenor was superior to the blood of middlemen, and they wanted the blood of Numenor to remain pure in the line of kings. Many of these Gondorians hailed from the coasts and places like Pelargir. These men supported Castamir the Usurper, who was the captain of ships in Gondor and was himself a descendant of King Anarion, but he was not the true heir. I imagine his followers were in the tens or hundreds of thousands, likely being greater in number than the Gondorian followers of Eldacar. He also commanded a great navy power, and Eldacar did not. With all of that said, let's get into the story of the war. Our tale of the Kin-strife starts with the relatively uneventful reign of Roman Decil II, first as a warrior general, then as regent, and then as king. After having victory over the Easterlings and fortifying the northern borders of Gondor up the river Limelight and building the Pillars of the Argonath, Roman Decil sought to strengthen his alliance with the Northmen of Rhovanion, who he deemed to be allies and friends. In 1250 of the Third Age, Roman Decil sent his son and heir Valacar to be the Gondorian ambassador to the men of Rhovanion, and Valacar lived with Vidugavia, who called himself King of Rhovanion. Now, it is important to note that at this point in the tale, Roman Decil had a younger brother, Calametar, who would not be king, and his grandson would be Castamir. Now, it is no surprise that during Valacar's time among the Northmen, he fell in love with that people and their ways, and he wedded Vildumavi, the daughter of King Vidugavia. King Roman Decil had to give his blessing as to not alienate his allies in the north, and so it came to pass that Valacar and Vidumavi were married, and had a son named Vinitharia in 1255. 5 years later, in 1260 of the Third Age, King Roman Decil recalled his son and his family from the north, and upon their arrival, the idea of mixed blood in the royal family did not sit well with some of the high men of Gondor. Vidumavi and her people were short-lived in comparison to the descendants of Numenor, and the men were afraid that the descendants of Rhovanion would face the same fate. The fear of short-lived kings and the prejudice against the Northmen of Rhovanion entering the kingdom of Gondor spread, especially in the southern fiefdoms near to the sea in Gondor. Eventually, Valacar came into kingship and would rule, and it would not be until his death in 1432 that rebellion and uprising broke out. With the coronation of Vinitharia, now named Eldacar in Gondor, full-scale rebellion broke out. Some saw Eldacar as a half-breed who had no right to rule, while others saw him as the rightful heir to the throne. At this time, the capital of Gondor was still Osgiliath, and it had not yet removed to Minas Anor or Minas Tirith in the west, and that is where much of the devastation of the war happened, in Osgiliath. In the first part of the war, there was fighting for 5 years until Castamir, who is descended from Calametar, and thus the line of kings, drove Eldacar from Osgiliath. Many people supported Castamir instead of Eldacar within the kingdom, as Castamir was a full-blooded Dunedain, instead of his distant cousin who had mixed blood. It was in 1437 when Eldacar fled to Rovanion from Osgiliath to regroup with his other kindred. But Osgiliath had been burned, the Dome of Stars destroyed, and the Osgiliath Stone, the Master Palantir, was lost in the River Anduin forevermore. Castamir usurped the throne, becoming the king of Gondor, and he murdered Eldacar's eldest son and heir, Ornendil. Eldacar would regroup in Rovanion for 10 years, and all the while Castamir ruled in Gondor, and, having shown cruelty during the war, and being an ungenerous and arrogant ruler himself, he lost some support in Gondor. Furthermore, Castamir planned to remove the seat of the ruling kings of Gondor from Osgiliath to Pelargir in the south, which dismayed the people of Anorion and Ithilien, nigh to Osgiliath. But in 1447, with his allies from Rovanion, the ever-loyal men who were the ancestors of the Eotheid and Rohirrim, and some other allies among the people of the north and the Dunedain who were loyal to him, Eldacar regrouped and marched south once more to take back what was his, and to avenge his son. Approximately 50 miles south of Minas Anor, the road to Pelargir passed the river Irui in Lebanon, and that was where Eldacar's forces assailed Castamir and his men. So the Battle of the Crossings of Irui took place, and much blood of Gondor was spilt that day, but Eldacar himself slew Castamir and avenged his own son. The sons of Castamir and the remaining forces fled to Pelargir, and were there besieged by Eldacar's forces for a year, for Eldacar did not have the naval power to stop them from being resupplied by sea. In 1448, these rebels escaped Pelargir and sailed for Umbar, uniting with the people there to become a constant threat to Gondor for most of the remainder of the Third Age, bringing more Númenórean blood there to join not only with the middlemen of that land, but with the Black Númenóreans also therein. These followers of Castamir would become the Corsairs of Umbar, but for our story here, Eldacar would rule in Gondor until 1490, being 235 years old when he died, leaving the throne to his younger son Aldemir, thus disproving the idea that those in the lineage of kings would be shorter-lived due to the blood of Rovanion. But indeed, much blood of Númenor had been spilt in this war, and it would continue to wane as the ages went on. The diluting of the blood of Númenor, however, is not necessarily a bad thing, for those wishing to preserve it through prejudice against those without it only brought further ruin, death, and loss of that very Númenórean blood, as well as other blood. Besides, from the actions of the loyal men of Rovanion, we see that no matter where one comes from, greatness and good deeds may always be achieved by any with the willing heart to do so. And even those with such Númenórean blood, like Castamir, could do great evil. It was in fact by Eldacar's mixed blood and family from Rovanion that he was able to indeed retake Gondor and re-establish it as a good and just kingdom. And so we come to the end of our tale about the Kin-strife, the Gondorian Civil War. From the Kin-strife, we see that acceptance, alliance, and love should always overcome prejudice. It is who we choose to be, not who we have been or are expected to be, that truly counts. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you all enjoyed this. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about the Kin-strife? Let me know in the comments below. For me, this has always been a fascinating and lesser-known bit of lore in the history of Gondor that I hope more people learn about because it's just so interesting. Please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for our podcasts and Discord server. Links are in the description below. I wanted to shout out our Valar tier patrons over on Patreon: Adrian De la Torre, Chris Ortner, Peter Sheppard, Kyle Wetzel, Lane Grimes, Samuel McBee, Jonathan Putnam, and Mark Kralik. Thank you guys so much. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with another live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on August 23rd. I can't wait to talk to you all during the live stream. Everyone, as always, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.